Question 1. Implementation of a new admissions policy at the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics requires the admissions committee to evaluate candidates based on a revised set of criteria. The committee is under pressure from the Academy's administration to meet ambitious enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year. Proposal is put forth to consider applicants who may not fully meet the academic prerequisites, but have demonstrated significant potential for future financial contributions to the Academy through family donations or future career prospects. How should the admissions committee proceed to ensure compliance with ethical standards and the Academy's regulatory framework? Option A. Evaluate all applicants strictly based on the published academic admission criteria, ensuring fairness and equal opportunity for all, and report any concerns about meeting enrollment targets to the administration with recommendations for alternative strategies. Option B. Create a separate review process for applicants with strong connections or influence, allowing them to be admitted without undergoing the standard evaluation based on academic merit. Option C. Prioritize applicants who have demonstrated potential for significant financial contributions to the Academy, even if they do not fully meet the academic prerequisites, to help achieve enrollment targets. Option D. Adjust the academic admission standards downwards for specific groups of applicants to increase the overall number of admitted students and meet enrollment goals. The correct answer is A. Evaluate all applicants strictly based on the published academic admission criteria, ensuring fairness and equal opportunity for all, and report any concerns about meeting enrollment targets to the administration with recommendations for alternative strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the Academy's immediate financial needs and the long-term integrity of its admissions process. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can tempt decision-makers to overlook established criteria, potentially compromising the quality of the student body and the Academy's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with ethical responsibilities and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a rigorous and objective assessment of all applicants based solely on the published admission criteria. This ensures fairness and equal opportunity for all prospective students, upholding the Academy's commitment to academic merit. Adherence to the established admission regulations, which are designed to select candidates best suited for academic success, is paramount. This approach aligns with the principles of transparency and accountability expected of educational institutions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes candidates based on their potential to contribute financially, irrespective of their academic qualifications, violates the fundamental principle of merit-based admissions. This could lead to the admission of underqualified students, negatively impacting academic standards and potentially leading to higher dropout rates. Such a practice would also be a breach of the Academy's own admission policies and could be seen as discriminatory. Another incorrect approach that involves creating special admission quotas for individuals with connections or influence, bypassing the standard evaluation process, undermines the fairness and impartiality of the admission system. This practice is unethical as it grants preferential treatment and disadvantages other deserving applicants. It also erodes trust in the Academy selection process. A further incorrect approach that involves lowering the admission standards for certain groups to artificially inflate enrollment numbers without a clear academic justification compromises the academic rigor of the institution. This can lead to a dilution of academic quality and may not adequately prepare students for their future careers or further studies. It also fails to uphold the integrity of the educational program. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the Academy's mission, values, and regulatory obligations. Decision-makers must prioritize ethical conduct and adherence to established policies over short-term gains. When faced with conflicting pressures, seeking guidance from senior leadership, legal counsel, or ethics committees is advisable. A commitment to transparency, fairness, and academic excellence should guide all decisions related to admissions. Question 2. Quality control measures reveal a significant similarity between a portion of an applicant's submitted essay for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam and previously published academic work, raising concerns about potential plagiarism. The admissions committee is under pressure to finalize admissions quickly. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the admissions committee to take? Option A. Proceed with admitting the applicant while flagging the essay for future review, prioritizing the timely completion of admissions and avoiding potential controversy. Option B. Initiate a formal investigation into the suspected plagiarism according to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics academic integrity policy, ensuring the applicant is notified and given an opportunity to respond before any decision is made. Option C. Immediately reject the applicant's submission due to the suspected plagiarism, citing the need to maintain academic standards and expedite the admissions process. Option D. Inform the applicant of the suspected plagiarism and ask them to rewrite the essay within 24 hours to avoid rejection without a formal investigation. The correct answer is C. Immediately reject the applicant's submission due to the suspected plagiarism, citing the need to maintain academic standards and expedite the admissions process. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between maintaining academic integrity and potentially jeopardizing a student's academic future. The pressure to uphold the Academy's reputation and the integrity of its admissions process clashes with the need for fairness and due process for the applicant. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests ethically and in accordance with the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics established admission guidelines and ethical codes. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation into the suspected plagiarism, adhering strictly to the Academy's established academic integrity policy. This policy likely outlines specific procedures for handling suspected academic misconduct, including notification of the applicant, providing an opportunity for the applicant to respond, and a fair review by an independent committee. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to established rules, ensuring that any decision is based on evidence and due process, thereby upholding the Academy's commitment to academic honesty. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the application based solely on the suspicion without further investigation. This fails to provide the applicant with due process and violates the principle of presumed innocence until proven guilty. Ethically, it is unfair to penalize someone without giving them a chance to defend themselves. Regulatorily, it bypasses the established procedures for handling academic misconduct, which are designed to ensure fairness and consistency. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the suspected plagiarism to avoid potential negative publicity or to meet admission targets. This approach compromises academic integrity and devalues the hard work of honest applicants. Ethically, it is dishonest and sets a dangerous precedent. Regulatorily, it violates the Academy's commitment to maintaining high academic standards and could lead to a loss of credibility. A third incorrect approach would be to confront the applicant informally without following the official disciplinary procedures. This lacks the formality and impartiality required for such serious allegations and could lead to misunderstandings or an inability to properly document the process. Ethically, it is unprofessional and undermines the established governance of the Academy. Regulatorily, it deviates from the prescribed protocols for handling academic integrity issues. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Recognizing the ethical and regulatory implications of the situation. 2. Consulting the relevant internal policies and guidelines of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics regarding academic integrity and admissions. 3. Initiating a formal, impartial investigation according to established procedures. 4. Ensuring that the applicant is informed of the allegations and given a fair opportunity to respond. 5. Making a decision based on the evidence gathered and in strict accordance with the Academy's policies. 6. Maintaining confidentiality and professionalism throughout the process. Question 3. During the evaluation of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics Entrance Examination Risk Assessment Framework, which of the following approaches best ensures the integrity and fairness of the admissions process for prospective students? Option A. Emphasizing the speed and efficiency of the risk assessment process to minimize administrative overhead, accepting a general overview of potential risks without in-depth analysis of specific vulnerabilities. Option B. Relying on historical pass rates as the sole indicator of risk, assuming that past performance accurately reflects future potential and the suitability of the current examination design. Option C. Focusing primarily on the perceived difficulty of the question to ensure a rigorous selection, without detailed consideration of how this difficulty might disproportionately affect students from less resourced educational backgrounds. Option D. Prioritizing the identification of potential biases in question content and format that could disadvantage specific demographic groups, and assessing the exam's alignment with the expected foundational knowledge for economics and statistics programs. The correct answer is D. Prioritizing the identification of potential biases in question content and format that could disadvantage specific demographic groups, and assessing the exam's alignment with the expected foundational knowledge for economics and statistics programs. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to balance the Academy's need for accurate student assessment with the ethical obligation to ensure fairness and prevent undue stress. The entrance exam is a critical gateway, and the risk assessment process must be robust yet sensitive to the diverse backgrounds of potential students. The Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, like any educational institution, operates under guidelines that prioritize academic integrity and equitable opportunity. Correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that considers the potential impact of exam design on different student demographics, including those with varying levels of prior academic preparation or access to resources. This approach aligns with the principles of fair assessment, which are implicitly or explicitly part of educational regulatory frameworks in Kazakhstan, aiming to identify genuine aptitude rather than test-taking proficiency alone. It acknowledges that external factors can influence performance and seeks to mitigate their disproportionate effect. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the difficulty of questions, without considering their relevance to the curriculum, or the potential for bias fails to meet the standards of a fair and effective entrance examination. This could lead to the exclusion of capable students who might have excelled with a more appropriately calibrated assessment. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes speed of administration over thoroughness of risk identification, neglects the fundamental responsibility to ensure the assessment process is sound and justifiable. This haste can overlook critical vulnerabilities in the exam's design or administration that could compromise its validity. Professionals tasked with designing or evaluating entrance examinations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves first clearly defining the objectives of the assessment, then identifying potential risks to its validity and fairness, and subsequently developing mitigation strategies. This process should be iterative, involving review and feedback from relevant stakeholders, and grounded in an understanding of the specific regulatory and ethical expectations governing educational admissions in Kazakhstan. Question 4. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood and high impact associated with potential inconsistencies in the difficulty level across different versions of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam. This risk could lead to perceived unfairness among applicants. Considering the Academy's stated commitment to equitable admissions, which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response to this risk? Option A. Propose a significant reduction in the overall complexity of the entrance exam to minimize any potential for difficulty variations. Option B. Immediately adjust the scoring for the current exam to compensate for perceived difficulty variations without further investigation. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the exam development and validation process to identify root causes of potential inconsistencies and implement enhanced quality control measures for future exam versions. Option D. Classify this risk as inherent to all standardized testing, and therefore requiring no specific intervention beyond standard exam administration procedures. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the exam development and validation process to identify root causes of potential inconsistencies and implement enhanced quality control measures for future exam versions. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an understanding of how to interpret and apply a risk matrix in a practical, ethical, and regulatory context relevant to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam framework. The challenge lies in moving beyond a purely theoretical understanding of risk assessment to making a sound judgment call based on the provided information and the overarching principles of fairness and integrity in an academic admissions process. The need for careful judgment stems from the potential impact of the decision on applicants and the reputation of the academy. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the identified risks against the academy's established risk appetite and mitigation strategies. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of sound governance and responsible decision-making expected within an educational institution. Specifically, it necessitates considering the likelihood and impact of each risk, and then determining if existing controls are adequate or if further action is required to bring the risk within acceptable levels. This aligns with the general principles of risk management that would be implicitly expected in the regulatory framework governing such an institution, emphasizing proactive identification and management of potential issues that could compromise the integrity of the entrance exam process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the perceived difficulty of the exam for a specific group of applicants, without considering the broader risk implications, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the systematic nature of risk assessment and the need for objective criteria. It also risks introducing bias into the decision-making process, which is ethically problematic and could violate principles of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately recommending a significant change to the exam content based on a single data point from the risk matrix, without further investigation or consultation, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could lead to unintended consequences, such as devaluing the exam or creating new, unforeseen risks. It bypasses the necessary steps of analysis and validation. A further incorrect approach that dismisses the risks identified in the matrix as being inherent to any entrance exam, and therefore requiring no further action, is also flawed. This demonstrates a failure to engage with the risk management process and a disregard for potential vulnerabilities. It neglects the responsibility to ensure the exam is robust, fair, and defensible. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the context and objectives of the risk assessment. 2. Thoroughly analyzing the identified risks, considering their likelihood and impact. 3. Evaluating the effectiveness of existing controls and mitigation strategies. 4. Comparing the residual risk against the organization's risk appetite. 5. Developing and implementing appropriate action plans for risks that exceed the acceptable threshold. 6. Documenting the process and decisions. Question 5. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in the number of research publications by faculty members over the past year. The Academy is considering highlighting this metric prominently in its promotional materials for prospective students. Which approach to presenting this performance data is most aligned with responsible institutional reporting and ethical considerations for an educational institution? Option A. Using anecdotal evidence and testimonials from a few faculty members about their research productivity to support the claim of increased academic output. Option B. Focusing exclusively on the increase in publication numbers, suggesting it directly translates to improved teaching quality and student success, without providing supporting evidence for this link. Option C. Developing a balanced scorecard that includes metrics on publication output, alongside indicators of research impact, e.g., citation rates, influence on policy, student learning outcomes, and faculty engagement in teaching and mentorship. Option D. Presenting the raw number of publications as a primary indicator of academic strength, without further context or analysis of their impact or relevance. Correct answer is D. Presenting the raw number of publications as a primary indicator of academic strength, without further context or analysis of their impact or relevance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for accurate financial reporting with the potential for misinterpretation or manipulation of performance metrics. The Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to present its performance data transparently and ethically to stakeholders, including prospective students, faculty, and regulatory bodies. The challenge lies in selecting performance indicators that are both meaningful and resistant to superficial or misleading interpretations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen metrics truly reflect the Academy's educational quality and operational efficiency, rather than being easily gamed or presented out of context. The correct approach involves focusing on a balanced set of performance indicators that capture multiple dimensions of the Academy's success, including academic outcomes, student satisfaction, and faculty development, while ensuring these metrics are clearly defined and contextualized. This aligns with the principles of responsible institutional management and transparent reporting, which are implicitly expected of educational institutions operating within any regulatory framework that values integrity and accountability. While specific regulations for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam are not detailed here, the general ethical imperative for educational institutions is to provide a true and fair view of their performance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on easily quantifiable but potentially superficial metrics, such as the number of published papers, without considering their impact or relevance, fails to provide a holistic picture of academic excellence. This can lead to a misallocation of resources and a distorted perception of the academy's strengths. Another incorrect approach that emphasizes short-term gains or easily manipulated figures, like a sudden increase in enrollment without corresponding improvements in teaching quality or infrastructure, can create an illusion of success that is not sustainable and ultimately detrimental to the institution's reputation and the student experience. A third incorrect approach that relies on subjective or unverified claims of success, without any supporting data or clear methodology, directly undermines the principles of evidence-based assessment and can be seen as misleading to stakeholders. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a systematic evaluation of potential performance indicators. This includes considering their relevance to the institution's mission and strategic goals, their measurability and reliability, their susceptibility to manipulation, and their ability to provide a comprehensive and balanced view of performance. Professionals should consult relevant institutional policies, ethical guidelines, and best practices in educational assessment to ensure their chosen metrics are robust and defensible. Question 6. Governance review demonstrates that the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics requires external expertise to assess its current governance structures. The selection committee is tasked with identifying suitable candidates, which approach best upholds the principles of good governance and academic integrity. Option A. Prioritize candidates with established personal relationships with senior academy leadership, ensuring a smooth working dynamic and quick understanding of institutional nuances. Option B. Engage advisors who have previously worked with the academy on unrelated projects, assuming their familiarity with the institution negates the need for a formal conflict of interest declaration. Option C. Conduct a broad search for candidates with demonstrable expertise in academic governance and a proven track record, followed by a rigorous vetting process that includes a mandatory declaration and assessment of potential conflicts of interest. Option D. Select advisors based solely on their academic reputation, without a formal assessment of their practical experience in governance reviews or their potential conflicts of interest. Correct answer is A. Prioritize candidates with established personal relationships with senior academy leadership, ensuring a smooth working dynamic and quick understanding of institutional nuances. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for transparency and accountability in academic governance, and the potential for perceived bias or undue influence when selecting external advisors. The Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, like any reputable institution, must adhere to principles of good governance that prioritize fairness, objectivity, and the best interests of its stakeholders, including students, faculty, and the wider academic community. The selection of external advisors for a critical governance review requires careful consideration to ensure that the process is robust, impartial, and free from conflicts of interest, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the review and its outcomes. The correct approach involves a structured and transparent selection process that actively seeks diverse expertise while rigorously assessing potential conflicts of interest. This aligns with general principles of good governance and ethical conduct expected in academic institutions, which often mirror best practices found in regulatory frameworks governing public and nonprofit organizations. Specifically, it emphasizes due diligence in vetting candidates, ensuring that any potential conflicts are identified and managed appropriately, and that the selection is based on merit and suitability for the task. This proactive stance builds trust and confidence in the review process. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize personal connections or expediency over a thorough vetting process. This could lead to the selection of advisors who may not possess the most relevant expertise or who may have undisclosed conflicts of interest, potentially compromising the objectivity and credibility of the review. Such an approach fails to uphold the ethical obligation to act in the best interests of the Academy and its stakeholders, and could be seen as a breach of good governance principles. Another incorrect approach would be to limit the pool of potential advisors to a narrow group without a clear justification, such as a lack of available expertise. This could inadvertently exclude highly qualified individuals and may raise questions about the fairness and comprehensiveness of the selection process. It fails to demonstrate a commitment to seeking the best possible advice and could lead to a less effective review. A further incorrect approach would be to proceed with advisors without a formal process for declaring and managing potential conflicts of interest. This creates a significant risk of bias, actual or perceived, influencing the review's findings and recommendations. It undermines the principle of impartiality and can lead to a loss of confidence in the governance structures of the Academy. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing clear selection criteria, developing a transparent and documented selection procedure, conducting thorough due diligence on all candidates, and implementing a robust system for identifying, declaring, and mitigating any potential conflicts of interest. This ensures that decisions are made on objective grounds and that the integrity of the process is maintained. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some prospective students found certain questions in the recent Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam to be ambiguous, potentially affecting their performance. As an administrator responsible for the examination process, what is the most appropriate course of action? Strictly adhering to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics regulatory framework for entrance exams. Option A. Conduct an informal discussion with a few select faculty members to gauge their opinion on the ambiguity and make a decision based on their consensus. Option B. Inform the stakeholders that the examination questions are final and cannot be reviewed or altered after the exam has been administered, without any further investigation. Option C. Initiate a formal review of the specific questions identified as ambiguous by consulting the Academy's established procedures for candidate feedback and appeals, and if deemed valid, consider appropriate adjustments or clarifications according to the Academy's guidelines. Option D. Immediately revise the scoring criteria for the ambiguous questions to accommodate the perceived difficulty, without consulting the official examination regulations or the examination board. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal review of the specific questions identified as ambiguous by consulting the Academy's established procedures for candidate feedback and appeals, and if deemed valid, consider appropriate adjustments or clarifications according to the Academy's guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need to address stakeholder concerns and the imperative to adhere to the established regulatory framework of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam. The pressure to demonstrate responsiveness can tempt individuals to bypass or misinterpret existing guidelines, leading to potential breaches of academic integrity and fairness. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder satisfaction with the non-negotiable principles of the examination process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics official examination regulations and guidelines concerning candidate appeals and feedback mechanisms. This approach prioritizes adherence to the established procedures, ensuring that any feedback is processed through the designated channels. Specifically, it requires understanding the scope of what constitutes a valid ground for appeal or review as defined by the Academy's internal policies. This upholds the principle of fairness and equal treatment for all candidates, as it ensures that any adjustments or clarifications are made based on predefined criteria and processes, preventing arbitrary decisions. This aligns with the overarching regulatory framework, designed to maintain the integrity and credibility of the entrance examination. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing changes based solely on the feedback, without consulting the official regulations, fails to acknowledge the established governance structure of the Academy. This bypasses the defined appeal and review processes, potentially creating a precedent for unregulated adjustments and undermining the authority of the examination board. It also risks inconsistent application of rules, which is a direct violation of the principle of fairness. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the feedback entirely without any form of review or acknowledgement, is professionally unsound and ethically questionable. While it adheres to the letter of not deviating from the current exam, it fails to address legitimate concerns raised by stakeholders, potentially leading to dissatisfaction and a perception of unresponsiveness. This can damage the Academy's reputation and its relationship with prospective students and their representatives. A further incorrect approach, which is to interpret the feedback in a way that benefits a specific group of candidates without a clear basis in the regulation, constitutes a breach of impartiality. This introduces bias into the examination process, violating the fundamental ethical obligation to treat all candidates equitably and to uphold the integrity of the assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the core issue. Recognize the stakeholder feedback as a point of concern requiring attention. 2. Consult the governing framework. Immediately refer to the official regulations, policies, and guidelines of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics pertaining to entrance examinations, feedback, and appeals. 3. Assess the feedback against the framework. Determine if the feedback raises issues that are covered by existing regulations, or if it suggests a need for clarification or a formal review process as outlined by the Academy. 4. Follow established procedures. If the feedback aligns with grounds for appeal or review, initiate the process as defined by the Academy. If it suggests a systemic issue, escalate it through appropriate internal channels for consideration in future examination cycles, while still adhering to current regulations for the ongoing process. 5. Communicate transparently. Provide a clear and timely response to stakeholders, explaining the process being followed and the basis for any decisions, referencing the Academy's regulations. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates that a significant number of applicants from a particular preparatory course have achieved unusually high scores on the recent entrance examination for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics. Whispers of potential irregularities in the administration of this preparatory course have reached the admissions committee. The committee is under pressure to meet its enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial investigation into the preparatory course and the examination results, following the Academy's established procedures for academic integrity and admissions, while temporarily withholding the final admission decisions for applicants from that specific preparatory course pending the investigation's outcome. Option B. Proceed with admitting all applicants from the preparatory course who meet the minimum score threshold, as the pressure to meet enrollment targets is high, and a formal investigation could cause delays and negative publicity. Option C. Immediately disqualify all applicants from the preparatory course due to the suspicion of irregularities, to maintain the perceived fairness of the examination process. Option D. Focus solely on the financial implications of the preparatory course's alleged misconduct and seek compensation from the course provider, without directly addressing the admission status of the applicants. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial investigation into the preparatory course and the examination results, following the Academy's established procedures for academic integrity and admissions, while temporarily withholding the final admission decisions for applicants from that specific preparatory course, pending the investigation's outcome. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between the immediate financial interests of the university and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, like any educational institution, is bound by its own internal regulations and broader Kazakhstani educational standards to maintain fairness and transparency in admissions. The pressure to meet enrollment targets, while a legitimate institutional concern, must not override the fundamental principles of academic integrity. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional needs with ethical responsibilities. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, adhering strictly to the established examination protocols and the Academy's internal disciplinary procedures. This approach prioritizes the integrity of the examination process and upholds the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. Specifically, it aligns with the general principles of academic fairness and due process expected within the Kazakhstani higher education system, which emphasizes merit-based admissions and the prevention of academic misconduct. The Academy's internal regulations, which would govern examination conduct and appeals, would mandate such an investigation to ensure fairness and prevent undue advantage. An incorrect approach that involves immediate disciplinary action without a proper investigation would fail to uphold due process. This would violate the principle of innocent until proven guilty and could lead to unjust penalties, damaging the reputation of the academy and potentially leading to legal challenges. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the allegations to avoid potential negative publicity or disruption, would be a severe ethical failure. This would undermine the credibility of the academy's admissions process and betray the trust placed in it by prospective students and the wider community. Such an action would also contravene any regulatory requirements for maintaining academic standards and investigating potential breaches. A third incorrect approach, which might involve selectively investigating only certain applicants or focusing solely on the financial implications, would demonstrate bias and a lack of commitment to a fair and transparent process. This would violate the ethical duty to treat all applicants equitably and could lead to discriminatory outcomes. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the report of irregularities and initiating a formal review. 2. Consulting the academy's internal regulations and relevant Kazakhstani educational guidelines concerning examination integrity and disciplinary procedures. 3. Appointing an impartial committee or individual to conduct a thorough and confidential investigation, gathering evidence from all relevant parties. 4. Ensuring that any subsequent actions are based on established facts and follow the prescribed disciplinary procedures, with clear communication to all involved. 5. Prioritizing fairness, transparency, and the long-term reputation of the institution. Question 9. The control framework reveals a need to enhance the academy's resilience against potential disruptions. Which approach to risk assessment would best serve the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics in identifying and prioritizing these potential disruptions for proactive mitigation? Option A. A reactive approach that focuses on addressing disruptions only after they have occurred, documenting the incident, and implementing immediate, ad hoc solutions to restore normal operations. Option B. A systematic process of identifying potential threats to the academy's core functions, evaluating their likelihood and potential impact on academic delivery, financial stability, and reputation, and then prioritizing them based on a combined assessment of severity and probability. Option C. An approach that solely concentrates on identifying minor administrative inefficiencies and operational bottlenecks within non-academic departments, assuming these are the primary sources of significant risk. Option D. A qualitative assessment that relies on anecdotal evidence and personal opinions of staff members regarding potential risks, without a structured methodology for evaluation or prioritization. The correct answer is B. A systematic process of identifying potential threats to the academy's core functions, evaluating their likelihood and potential impact on academic delivery, financial stability, and reputation, and then prioritizing them based on a combined assessment of severity and probability. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of an entrance examination. The Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, like any educational institution, has a responsibility to ensure the integrity of its admissions process. This involves assessing candidates not just on academic merit, but also on their understanding of fundamental principles relevant to their chosen field, including risk management. The challenge lies in designing a question that probes conceptual understanding of risk assessment within the context of an academic institution's control framework, without resorting to complex calculations that might disadvantage students with different mathematical backgrounds or focus. The correct approach involves evaluating the candidate's ability to identify and prioritize risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, as understood within a general control framework applicable to an academic setting. This aligns with the fundamental principles of risk management, which are universally applicable. Specifically, a strong risk assessment approach would involve considering the strategic objectives of the academy, e.g., academic excellence, reputation, financial stability, and then identifying potential threats or vulnerabilities that could hinder the achievement of these objectives. Prioritization would then be based on a qualitative assessment of the severity of the potential impact and the probability of occurrence. This aligns with the general principles of risk management that are often introduced in economics and statistics programs, emphasizing a structured and analytical approach to identifying and mitigating potential problems. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on operational risks without considering their strategic implications, or to propose a risk assessment that is overly simplistic and fails to acknowledge the interconnectedness of various risk factors within an academic institution. For example, focusing only on minor administrative errors without considering the reputational damage from a significant academic integrity breach would be a failure to adequately assess the full spectrum of risks. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest a risk assessment methodology that is too complex or requires specialized knowledge not expected of an entrance exam candidate, thereby failing to assess the core understanding of risk assessment principles. Furthermore, an approach that ignores the ethical dimensions of risk management, such as the potential for bias in risk identification or the responsibility to report significant risks, would also be professionally unacceptable. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first clearly defining the objective of the assessment. In this case, it is to gauge a candidate's foundational understanding of risk assessment principles relevant to an economics and statistics context. Second, it is crucial to consider the target audience and their expected knowledge base. For an entrance exam, the focus should be on conceptual understanding and application of core principles, not on advanced technical skills. Third, the assessment should be designed to elicit a thoughtful and analytical response that demonstrates critical thinking. Finally, the question and its evaluation criteria should be aligned with the broader goals and values of the institution. Question 10. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of unusual trading activity in a specific company's stock, which appears to be linked to upcoming, unannounced corporate news. A student preparing for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam, who has access to this system as part of their coursework, realizes this information could significantly impact investment decisions. The student has a close relative who is considering investing in this company. What is the most ethically and professionally appropriate course of action for the student? Option A. Report the observed trading activity and its potential link to unannounced news to the course instructor or designated academic supervisor for further investigation and guidance. Option B. Immediately inform the relative about the observed trading activity and its potential implications, advising them to buy or sell the stock accordingly. Option C. Ignore the observation, as it is part of a simulated exercise and not directly related to their personal financial interests. Option D. Contact the company directly to offer assistance in understanding the unusual trading patterns without mentioning the relative's potential investment. The correct answer is B. Immediately inform the relative about the observed trading activity and its potential implications, advising them to buy or sell the stock accordingly. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for accurate financial reporting with the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality and avoid conflicts of interest. The Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam, in its regulatory framework, emphasizes integrity and professional conduct. A student's role, even in an academic context simulating professional practice, is to uphold these principles. The correct approach involves recognizing the potential conflict of interest and the breach of confidentiality that would occur if the student were to use the information obtained from the monitoring system for personal gain or to influence investment decisions without proper authorization. The regulatory framework for academic integrity at the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, which mirrors professional ethical codes, mandates that students must not exploit privileged information. This approach upholds the principle of fairness and prevents the misuse of sensitive data, aligning with the Academy's commitment to producing ethically sound graduates. An incorrect approach would be to immediately use the identified discrepancies to advise a friend or family member on investment strategies. This fails to acknowledge the confidential nature of the information and the potential for personal gain derived from non-public data, which is a direct violation of ethical conduct and academic integrity principles. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancies entirely, as this neglects the responsibility to report potential issues within the simulated environment, even if not directly tasked with auditing. While not as egregious as exploiting the information, it demonstrates a lack of diligence and commitment to the principles of accurate financial observation. Finally, attempting to contact the company directly to help them without proper channels or authorization would also be an inappropriate response, as it bypasses established procedures and could create further complications, demonstrating a lack of understanding of professional protocols. Professionals, and by extension, students preparing for such roles, should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes ethical considerations and adherence to established rules. This involves first identifying any potential conflicts of interest or breaches of confidentiality. Next, they should consider the applicable regulations and ethical guidelines. Finally, they should choose the course of action that best upholds these principles, even if it means forgoing a potential personal advantage or immediate action. In this case, the most responsible action is to report the findings through the designated academic channels for review, rather than acting on the information unilaterally. Question 11. Investigation of a situation during the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam where a candidate is observed discreetly looking at notes concealed within their sleeve. What is the most appropriate professional course of action for an invigilator to take? Option A. Immediately stop the candidate and ask them to leave the examination hall, confiscating their exam paper. Option B. Discreetly confiscate the concealed notes and continue monitoring the candidate without further immediate intervention during the exam. Option C. Discreetly inform the candidate that their actions have been observed and advise them to cease such behavior, allowing them to continue the exam. Option D. Report the observed behavior to the chief invigilator or examination committee through the designated reporting channel, without direct confrontation with the candidate during the exam. The correct answer is B. Discreetly confiscate the concealed notes and continue monitoring the candidate without further immediate intervention during the exam. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between academic integrity and the desire to assist a student. The core of the challenge lies in upholding the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam regulations, which are designed to ensure a fair and equitable assessment process for all applicants. Providing direct assistance or unauthorized information to a candidate undermines this principle and constitutes a breach of examination rules. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the established examination protocols and reporting any observed irregularities through the designated channels. This upholds the integrity of the entrance examination process, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated based on their own merit and knowledge. The regulatory framework for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam mandates impartiality and fairness. By reporting the observed behavior to the examination proctor or relevant academic integrity committee, the individual acts in accordance with these principles, preventing potential unfair advantages and maintaining the credibility of the admissions process. This aligns with the ethical obligation to uphold academic standards and prevent academic misconduct. An incorrect approach would be to directly provide the student with the answers or hints. This is a direct violation of the examination rules, which prohibit any form of cheating or unauthorized assistance. Such an action would not only compromise the integrity of the exam, but also expose the individual to disciplinary action from the academy. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and take no action. While seemingly neutral, this passive stance allows for potential academic misconduct to go unchecked, indirectly contributing to an unfair examination environment. It fails to uphold the responsibility to maintain academic integrity, which is implicitly expected of individuals involved in the examination process. A third incorrect approach would be to confront the student directly and attempt to resolve the situation without involving the official examination authorities. This could escalate the situation, create a disturbance during the exam, and bypass the established procedures for handling academic integrity breaches, which are designed to ensure a fair and thorough investigation. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve immediate recognition of a potential breach of academic integrity, adherence to established reporting procedures, and a commitment to maintaining the fairness and validity of the examination. This involves prioritizing the integrity of the academic process over personal inclinations to help an individual in a manner that violates established rules. Question 12. Market research demonstrates a significant opportunity to increase enrollment by leveraging detailed student demographic and academic performance data collected during the admissions process for targeted marketing campaigns. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics. Option A. Utilize the collected student data for marketing without further assessment, as the data was lawfully collected for admissions and is therefore implicitly available for institutional promotion. Option B. Rely on informal discussions with admissions staff and faculty to gather insights on which student segments are most receptive to marketing, and proceed with campaigns based on these qualitative observations. Option C. Immediately initiate targeted marketing campaigns using all available student data to capitalize on the identified enrollment opportunity, assuming general marketing best practices are sufficient. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment to identify and mitigate privacy risks, ensuring all data usage aligns with the law of the Republic of Kazakhstan on personal data and its protection, and obtaining explicit consent for marketing purposes. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment to identify and mitigate privacy risks, ensuring all data usage aligns with the law of the Republic of Kazakhstan on personal data and its protection, and obtaining explicit consent for marketing purposes. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of the academy with the long-term ethical and regulatory obligations concerning student data privacy. The Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, like any educational institution, operates under specific Kazakhstani laws and regulations governing the collection, storage, and use of personal data. A key challenge is ensuring that any market research initiative, even one seemingly beneficial for student recruitment, does not inadvertently violate these privacy principles or erode trust. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes compliance with the law of the Republic of Kazakhstan on personal data and its protection, and any internal ethical guidelines of the academy. This assessment must identify potential risks to student privacy, evaluate the necessity and proportionality of data collection, and ensure that appropriate consent mechanisms are in place. It also requires considering the ethical implications of using student data for marketing purposes, even if legally permissible, and ensuring transparency with students about how their information will be used. This approach upholds the Academy's commitment to responsible data stewardship and maintains the trust of its prospective and current students. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing recruitment leads without a prior impact assessment fails to acknowledge the legal and ethical framework. This would likely violate the law of the Republic of Kazakhstan on personal data and its protection by potentially collecting or processing data without adequate legal grounds or consent, and by not adequately assessing the risks to individuals. Another incorrect approach that relies on informal data sharing or anecdotal evidence from faculty rather than a structured assessment is also professionally unacceptable. This method bypasses the necessary due diligence required by data protection laws and ethical standards, leading to potential noncompliance and a lack of accountability. It also fails to provide a robust basis for decision-making, as it lacks systematic data collection and analysis. A third incorrect approach that assumes existing general marketing practices are sufficient without specific consideration for student data privacy regulations is flawed. While general marketing principles are important, the sensitive nature of student data necessitates a tailored approach that adheres strictly to the specific legal requirements of Kazakhstan regarding personal information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should begin with identifying the objective of the initiative, e.g., improving recruitment, followed by an analysis of the data required, the potential privacy risks associated with that data, and the relevant legal and ethical obligations. Mitigation strategies should then be developed and implemented, including obtaining informed consent, anonymizing data where possible, and establishing clear data retention policies. Regular review and auditing of data handling practices are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and ethical conduct. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new national regulation concerning the transparency of financial aid allocation is set to be implemented. Considering the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics operational context, which of the following approaches would be the most appropriate for assessing the impact of this regulation on the Academy's financial reporting and administrative processes? Option A. Focus the assessment primarily on the direct costs associated with any necessary software upgrades or additional personnel required to comply with the new regulation. Option B. Rely on informal discussions with a few key administrative staff members to gauge their understanding of the regulation and its perceived impact. Option C. Postpone the detailed impact assessment until closer to the regulation's effective date to gather more concrete implementation details. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the effects on data collection, reporting systems, internal controls, staff training, and potential changes to financial statement disclosures, considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the effects on data collection, reporting systems, internal controls, staff training, and potential changes to financial statement disclosures, considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the applicant to evaluate the potential impact of a new regulatory change on the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics financial reporting processes. The challenge lies in identifying the most comprehensive and accurate method for assessing this impact, ensuring compliance with the Academy's internal policies and any relevant national accounting standards or educational regulations applicable in Kazakhstan. A superficial assessment could lead to misallocation of resources, non-compliance, and inaccurate financial statements, all of which carry significant reputational and operational risks for the Academy. The correct approach involves a detailed, multifaceted impact assessment that considers both quantitative and qualitative factors. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with best practices in risk management and financial oversight, which are implicitly expected of any educational institution operating within a regulated environment. Specifically, it necessitates understanding how the new regulation will affect data collection, processing, reporting systems, and the training needs of staff. This comprehensive view ensures that the Academy can proactively adapt its financial reporting to maintain accuracy, transparency, and compliance with the regulatory framework governing educational institutions in Kazakhstan. An approach that focuses solely on immediate cost implications is incorrect because it fails to capture the broader operational and compliance risks. Regulatory changes often have indirect costs, such as the need for new software, revised internal controls, or potential penalties for non-compliance, which are not immediately apparent from a cost-only perspective. This narrow focus violates the principle of thorough risk assessment. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal consultations with a few staff members is also incorrect. While informal input can be a starting point, it lacks the rigor and systematic data collection required for a reliable impact assessment. This method is prone to bias and incomplete information, potentially leading to an underestimation of the true impact and a failure to implement necessary changes, thus risking non-compliance with regulatory requirements. Finally, an approach that delays the assessment until the regulation's effective date is professionally unacceptable. Proactive assessment is a cornerstone of effective risk management. Delaying the impact assessment increases the likelihood of encountering unforeseen challenges, missing critical deadlines for implementation, and potentially facing sanctions for non-compliance. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a reactive rather than a strategic approach to regulatory changes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear methodology for impact assessment, engaging relevant stakeholders across departments, gathering data systematically, analyzing both direct and indirect consequences, and developing a concrete action plan for implementation and monitoring. This structured approach ensures that all potential impacts are considered and addressed effectively. Question 14. When evaluating the ethical responsibilities of an admissions officer at the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics regarding prospective students who are seeking guidance on the upcoming entrance examination, which of the following actions best upholds the principles of fairness and academic integrity as per the Academy's regulatory framework? Option A. Sharing a list of potential essay topics with a favored candidate, claiming it is to help them prepare more thoroughly, while withholding this list from others. Option B. Offering a specific candidate detailed insights into the weighting of different sections and suggesting areas where they should focus their study based on perceived weaknesses, information not shared with other candidates. Option C. advising a candidate on how to interpret ambiguous questions in the exam based on prior knowledge of the examiner's typical intentions, without informing other candidates of this interpretive strategy. Option D, providing general information about the exam format and the types of subject areas covered, while emphasizing that all candidates receive the same information and that no specific questions will be revealed. Correct answer is D, providing general information about the exam format and the types of subject areas covered, while emphasizing that all candidates receive the same information and that no specific questions will be revealed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes for the institution. The entrance exam for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics is designed to assess a candidate's aptitude and knowledge base. Maintaining the integrity of this assessment process is paramount to ensuring that admitted students meet the required standards and that the Academy's reputation for academic rigor is upheld. The challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate support for candidates and actions that could be construed as compromising the fairness of the examination. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the established examination protocols and ethical guidelines set forth by the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics. This means providing all candidates with the same standardized information and resources, ensuring a level playing field. Any form of preferential treatment or provision of unauthorized assistance would violate the principles of fairness and meritocracy that underpin academic admissions. Specifically, the Academy's internal regulations and the general ethical standards for educational institutions in Kazakhstan would prohibit any action that could be perceived as giving one candidate an unfair advantage. This includes ensuring that all examination materials are secure and that no candidate receives advanced knowledge or tailored assistance beyond what is generally available to all applicants. An incorrect approach would be to provide specific, tailored guidance to a particular candidate on potential exam questions or topics that are not made available to all applicants. This action directly undermines the principle of equal opportunity and introduces bias into the selection process. It violates the ethical obligation to treat all candidates fairly and impartially. Furthermore, such an action could be seen as a breach of trust by the Academy and could lead to reputational damage and a loss of confidence in the admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly hint at the difficulty of certain sections or the types of questions that might appear, even without explicit disclosure. This, too, creates an unfair advantage by allowing the candidate to focus their preparation in a way that other candidates, unaware of these hints, cannot. This constitutes a form of insider information that compromises the integrity of the assessment. The professional decision-making process in such situation should begin with a clear understanding of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics admission policies and ethical codes. When faced with a request or situation that could potentially compromise fairness, a professional should always err on the side of caution and uphold the established rules. This involves seeking clarification from superiors or the relevant admissions committee if there is any ambiguity. The guiding principle should be to ensure that the examination process is transparent, equitable, and free from any form of undue influence or bias. If a situation cannot be resolved by strictly adhering to existing guidelines, it should be escalated to ensure that the Academy's commitment to academic integrity is maintained. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows that the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics places significant emphasis on quantitative reasoning and analytical skills for its economics and statistics programs. A prospective student who has a strong background in humanities but limited exposure to advanced mathematics is preparing for the entrance exam. Which approach best aligns with the Academy's stated evaluation methodology to maximize their chances of admission? Option A. Focus intensely on developing advanced mathematical and statistical concepts directly relevant to the economics and statistics curriculum, seeking additional tutoring and resources to bridge the knowledge gap. Option B. Prioritize subjects that are generally considered easier to score well in, regardless of their direct relevance to economics or statistics, to boost overall exam scores. Option C. Rely on the advice of friends who have previously applied to the Academy, assuming the exam content and weighting have remained consistent over time. Option D. Dedicate the majority of study time to subjects within the humanities that align with their existing strengths, assuming the academy values a well-rounded academic profile. The correct answer is D. Dedicate the majority of study time to subjects within the humanities that align with their existing strengths, assuming the academy values a well-rounded academic profile. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for a prospective student applying to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, requiring them to understand the impact of their chosen academic path on their future admission prospects. The professional challenge lies in making informed decisions about academic specialization that align with the Academy's admission criteria and the competitive nature of entrance exams. Careful judgment is required to balance personal academic interests with the strategic considerations of university admissions. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics admission regulations and the specific weighting of different subjects or academic backgrounds in their entrance examination process. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the core requirement of the exam, demonstrating preparedness for the Academy's curriculum and selection standards. By aligning their preparation with the Academy's known evaluation methodology, the student maximizes their chances of success. This is ethically justified as it promotes transparency and fairness in the admissions process, allowing candidates to prepare effectively based on established criteria. An incorrect approach would be to assume that all academic subjects are equally valued by the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics without verifying this information. This is professionally flawed because it relies on unsubstantiated assumptions rather than concrete admission guidelines. Such an approach risks misallocating study time and effort, potentially neglecting areas that are critically assessed in the entrance exam. Ethically, it could be seen as a lack of diligence in understanding the requirements of the institution one wishes to join. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on subjects that are perceived as easier or more personally enjoyable, without considering their relevance to the Academy's curriculum or the entrance exam structure. This is professionally unsound as it prioritizes personal preference over strategic preparation for admission. It fails to acknowledge that the Academy's evaluation methodology is designed to assess specific competencies relevant to its programs. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to meeting the institution's standards. A third incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or the experiences of past applicants without consulting the official admission regulations of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics. This is professionally problematic because it introduces a high degree of uncertainty and potential misinformation. Admission criteria can change, and official documentation provides the most reliable and up-to-date information. Ethically, it is irresponsible to base critical decisions on unverified sources when official guidelines are available. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a systematic approach. First, identify the specific requirements and evaluation criteria of the institution. Second, gather official documentation, admission brochures, website information, faculty guidelines that outlines these criteria. Third, assess personal academic strengths and weaknesses in relation to these requirements. Fourth, develop a study plan that strategically addresses the most critical areas for the entrance exam. Finally, seek clarification from the admissions office if any aspect of the evaluation methodology remains unclear. Question 16. Analysis of a candidate's preparation for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam reveals they have been offered access to a set of questions that are claimed to be from a previous year's exam. The candidate is under significant pressure to gain admission. Which of the following represents the most ethically and regulatorily sound decision-making framework for this candidate? Option A. Politely decline the offer of the previous year's question, reaffirming commitment to honest preparation and adherence to all examination rules, and report the incident to the examination authorities. Option B. Share the offer of previous year's questions with other prospective candidates to ensure fairness, as everyone should have access to such materials. Option C. Accept the previous year's questions and use them to study, believing that understanding the types of questions asked is a legitimate form of preparation. Option D. Use the previous year's questions for practice, but avoid submitting them as part of the exam, assuming this is a gray area not explicitly forbidden. Correct answer is A. Politely decline the offer of the previous year's questions, reaffirming commitment to honest preparation and adherence to all examination rules, and report the incident to the examination authorities. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic success and the ethical imperative to uphold academic integrity. The pressure to perform well in entrance exams, especially for prestigious institutions like the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, can lead individuals to consider shortcuts. However, the regulatory framework governing such examinations strictly prohibits any form of academic dishonesty, as it undermines the fairness and validity of the assessment process. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and in compliance with the established rules. The correct approach involves a commitment to honest preparation and adherence to all examination guidelines. This means relying solely on one's own knowledge and understanding, acquired through legitimate study. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it upholds the principles of fairness, meritocracy, and academic integrity, which are fundamental to the educational system. The regulatory framework for entrance exams, as stipulated by the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics, explicitly forbids any form of cheating, including the use of unauthorized materials or assistance. Adhering to these rules ensures a level playing field for all candidates and preserves the credibility of the examination process. An incorrect approach that involves seeking or using unauthorized assistance, such as obtaining exam questions in advance or collaborating with others during the exam, represents a direct violation of academic integrity rules. This is ethically unacceptable as it constitutes deception and unfair advantage. Regulatory failure here lies in contravening the explicit prohibitions against cheating, which can lead to severe penalties, including disqualification from the exam and potential blacklisting from future academic pursuits. Another incorrect approach, such as misrepresenting one's qualifications or providing false information on the application, also constitutes academic dishonesty. This is ethically wrong as it involves deliberate falsehood and undermines the trust placed in applicants. The regulatory framework mandates truthful and accurate submissions, and any deviation is a breach of these regulations, leading to disqualification and reputational damage. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should follow a structured approach. 1. Identify the ethical dilemma. Recognize the conflict between personal gain and ethical obligations. 2. Consult the relevant regulations. Thoroughly understand the rules and guidelines of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics regarding entrance exams and academic integrity. 3. Evaluate potential actions against ethical principles and regulations. Consider the consequences of each possible course of action. 4. Choose the most ethical and compliant option. Prioritize honesty, integrity, and adherence to rules, even if it means facing challenges. 5. Seek guidance if unsure. If there is any ambiguity, consult with exam administrators or academic advisors. Question 17. The audit findings indicate that a significant number of applicant documents for the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam were miscategorized due to a new, internally developed filing system that has not yet been formally approved by the relevant academic or administrative bodies overseeing the entrance process. This miscategorization has led to delays in processing some applications. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this situation? Strictly adhering to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam regulatory framework. Option A. Seek informal guidance from senior faculty members not directly involved in admissions oversight to determine the best way to reorganize the files. Option B. Immediately reclassify all miscategorized documents according to the original, established filing system, and document the corrective actions taken, referencing the specific sections of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam regulations that mandate proper document handling and retention. Option C. Discard any documents that were miscategorized and are now deemed less critical for processing to expedite the remaining applications. Option D. Implement the new filing system immediately across all applicant documents to streamline processing and inform the audit committee of the change after the fact. The correct answer is B. Immediately reclassify all miscategorized documents according to the original, established filing system and document the corrective actions taken, referencing the specific sections of the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam regulations that mandate proper document handling and retention. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between the Academy's internal operational needs and the strict adherence to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam regulatory framework. The audit findings highlight a deviation from established procedures, which could have implications for the integrity and fairness of the entrance process. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate response that upholds regulatory compliance while addressing the operational issue. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific regulations governing the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam to ascertain the precise requirements for handling applicant documentation and the consequences of any deviations. This approach prioritizes understanding the letter and spirit of the law, ensuring that any corrective actions taken are fully compliant and do not inadvertently create new regulatory breaches. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and the integrity of the examination process, which is paramount in an academic setting. This aligns with the overarching principle of regulatory compliance, which mandates adherence to all stipulated rules and guidelines to maintain the credibility of the institution and its admissions procedures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate operational expediency, without consulting the relevant regulations, risks violating the exam's framework. For instance, simply reclassifying documents without understanding the specific rules on document handling and retention could lead to noncompliance. Another incorrect approach, such as discarding documents that do not meet an arbitrary internal standard, would be a direct contravention of any regulations that mandate the preservation of all submitted applicant materials for a specified period. A third incorrect approach, which involves seeking informal advice from individuals not officially designated to interpret or enforce the exam regulations, bypasses the established channels for regulatory guidance and could lead to misinterpretations and subsequent noncompliance. These failures stem from a lack of diligence in understanding and applying the specific regulatory framework. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with identifying the core issue and its potential regulatory implications. This is followed by a diligent search for and review of the specific regulatory framework applicable to the situation. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from the appropriate regulatory authority or designated internal compliance officer is crucial. Any proposed solution must then be evaluated against the regulatory requirements to ensure full compliance and ethical soundness before implementation. Question 18. Process analysis reveals that the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics is facing significant pressure to meet its enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year, with a projected shortfall impacting its operational budget. Proposal is put forth to admit a cohort of applicants who do not fully meet the standard academic prerequisites but have demonstrated potential for future academic success and possess strong connections to potential institutional donors. Which approach best upholds the integrity of the admissions process and adheres to the regulatory framework governing higher education institutions in Kazakhstan? Option A. Strictly adhere to all established admission criteria for every applicant, ensuring that only those who meet the defined academic standards are admitted, and explore alternative strategies for budget management. Option B. Prioritize admitting applicants who can secure significant external funding or donor commitments, even if their academic qualifications are below the standard threshold, to address the enrollment shortfall. Option C. Implement a conditional admission policy for all applicants who fall slightly below the standard criteria but are willing to undergo a remedial academic program before commencing their degree studies. Option D. Create a special admissions track for applicants with donor connections who do not meet standard prerequisites, allowing their admission based on a promise of future academic improvement and institutional support. The correct answer is A. Strictly adhere to all established admission criteria for every applicant, ensuring that only those who meet the defined academic standards are admitted, and explore alternative strategies for budget management. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the Academy's immediate financial needs and the long-term integrity of its admissions process, which is governed by the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics internal regulations and potentially broader educational standards set by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Kazakhstan. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can tempt individuals to overlook established criteria, risking reputational damage and undermining the academic meritocracy the institution aims to uphold. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with ethical obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of all applicants based strictly on the established admission criteria, regardless of external pressures or perceived institutional needs. This aligns with the principles of fairness, transparency, and academic integrity mandated by the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics internal policies and the broader regulatory framework for higher education in Kazakhstan. Adhering to these criteria ensures that admission decisions are merit-based and defensible, upholding the institution's reputation and the value of its degrees. An incorrect approach that prioritizes meeting enrollment targets by admitting underqualified candidates, even with a promise of future academic improvement, violates the fundamental principle of merit-based admissions. This action undermines the academic standards of the academy and could lead to a decline in the overall quality of graduates. Ethically, it is deceptive to both the underqualified applicant and the qualified applicants who are potentially disadvantaged. It also breaches the academy's internal regulations concerning admission prerequisites. Another incorrect approach, which involves creating a separate, less rigorous admission track for candidates who do not meet standard criteria but can secure external funding, also compromises academic integrity. While seemingly addressing financial needs, it creates a two-tiered system that devalues the standard admission process and may lead to perceptions of favoritism or a dilution of academic rigor for certain student cohorts. This could contravene principles of equal opportunity and fair assessment as outlined in the Academy's charter and relevant educational guidelines. A further incorrect approach, focusing solely on the potential financial contribution of an applicant without a comprehensive review of their academic qualifications against the established criteria, is ethically unsound and professionally irresponsible. This prioritizes financial gain over academic suitability, potentially admitting individuals who are unlikely to succeed in the program, thereby increasing dropout rates and negatively impacting the academy's academic standing. It directly disregards the established admission protocols designed to ensure a baseline level of academic preparedness. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding and strict adherence to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics admission regulations. This framework should include objective evaluation of all submitted documentation against defined criteria, a transparent and consistent application of these criteria to all candidates, and a commitment to upholding academic integrity above all other considerations, including short-term financial pressures. Escalation to higher authorities or relevant committees should be considered if external pressures conflict with these principles. Question 19. Research into the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance examination process has revealed a situation where an examiner notices a minor, but potentially impactful, ambiguity in the wording of a question that could lead to two different, yet plausible, interpretations of the correct answer for a particular candidate. The examiner is aware that one interpretation would result in a lower score for this candidate, while the other, if applied consistently, might lead to a higher score. The examiner also knows this candidate has demonstrated strong potential in other areas during the application process. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the examiner to take? Option A. Discuss the ambiguity with the candidate privately and allow them to clarify their intended answer, potentially leading to a score adjustment. Option B. Interpret the question in a way that benefits the candidate, considering their overall potential, and adjust the score accordingly. Option C. Immediately consult the official examination guidelines and report the ambiguity to the examination board or designated authority for a ruling on how to proceed, ensuring consistent application for all candidates. Option D. Ignore the ambiguity and proceed with the original scoring, assuming the candidate's interpretation was not the intended one. The correct answer is C. Immediately consult the official examination guidelines and report the ambiguity to the examination board or designated authority for a ruling on how to proceed, ensuring consistent application for all candidates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve positive results, which can be amplified in an entrance exam context. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for misinterpreting or misapplying ethical principles when faced with a situation that could impact a candidate's future. The core of the challenge lies in upholding the principles of fairness and honesty in the evaluation process. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to the established examination protocols. This means clearly communicating any potential ambiguities or issues to the examination board or relevant authority, rather than attempting to resolve them independently or in a manner that could be perceived as biased. This upholds the principle of fairness to all candidates and ensures the integrity of the entrance examination process, aligning with the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics commitment to merit-based admissions. The regulatory framework for such examinations typically emphasizes impartiality and adherence to documented procedures. An incorrect approach that involves subtly altering the scoring criteria to favor a particular candidate, even with the intention of acknowledging perceived effort or potential, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This undermines the objectivity of the examination and violates the principle of equal treatment for all applicants. It introduces bias and compromises the validity of the assessment. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the discrepancy and proceed with the original scoring, also fails to uphold professional standards. While it avoids active manipulation, it neglects the responsibility to ensure accuracy and fairness. This inaction can lead to an inequitable outcome and potentially allow a candidate who may not have met the objective criteria to gain an unfair advantage, thereby eroding trust in the examination system. A further incorrect approach, such as discussing the situation with the candidate and offering them an opportunity to clarify their answers in a way that could lead to a higher score, is also problematic. This blurs the lines of the examination process, potentially creating an appearance of impropriety and undermining the standardized nature of the assessment. It shifts the focus from objective evaluation to subjective intervention. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the examination's rules and ethical guidelines. When faced with an ambiguity or a potential issue, the first step is to consult the official examination regulations and seek clarification from the designated authority within the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics. This ensures that any action taken is in accordance with established procedures and ethical standards, prioritizing fairness, transparency, and the integrity of the academic evaluation process. Question 20. The performance metrics show a statistically significant correlation between specific pre-exam study materials provided by the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics and higher scores on previous entrance exams. A candidate, reviewing these metrics during a break, considers whether to focus their remaining study time exclusively on the areas highlighted by this correlation, believing it to be a strategic advantage. Based on the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam regulations, what is the most appropriate course of action for this candidate? Option A. The candidate should intensify their study of the areas indicated by the performance metrics, viewing this as a legitimate discovery of effective preparation strategies within the scope of the exam's provided information. Option B. The candidate should immediately cease reviewing the performance metrics and report their observation to the examination proctor, seeking guidance on the ethical implications of using such data for strategic study adjustments. Option C. The candidate should discreetly share their observation about the performance metrics with other candidates during the break, suggesting a collective focus on the correlated areas to maximize their chances of success. Option D. The candidate should refrain from altering their study strategy based on the performance metrics and continue with their original study plan, as the exam is designed to test a broad range of knowledge and skills, not just areas correlated with past performance. The correct answer is D. The candidate should refrain from altering their study strategy based on the performance metrics and continue with their original study plan, as the exam is designed to test a broad range of knowledge and skills, not just areas correlated with past performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret and apply the principles of academic integrity and ethical conduct as defined by the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics entrance exam regulations. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate academic inquiry and actions that could be construed as academic misconduct, particularly when dealing with potentially sensitive information or situations that could create a conflict of interest. Careful judgment is required to uphold the Academy's standards and ensure a fair and equitable examination process for all candidates. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to the Almaty Academy of Economics and Statistics specific guidelines for entrance exams, particularly concerning the use of external resources and the definition of academic misconduct. This approach prioritizes integrity, fairness, and compliance with the established rules by seeking clarification from the examination proctor or relevant academy authority regarding the permissible use of performance metrics and ensuring all actions are within the defined boundaries of the exam. The individual demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and academic honesty. This aligns with the Academy's likely regulatory framework, which would aim to prevent any form of unfair advantage or data misuse during the entrance process. An incorrect approach would be to assume the performance metrics are freely available for analysis without explicit permission, or to interpret them in a way that could be seen as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage. For instance, attempting to analyze the metrics to predict future exam questions or to infer specific grading criteria not publicly disclosed would be a violation of academic integrity. This would likely contravene regulations designed to ensure a standardized and objective assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential implications of the metrics and proceed with an analysis that, while not explicitly forbidden, could be perceived as ethically questionable or as circumventing the spirit of the examination rules. Such actions could lead to accusations of academic misconduct, jeopardizing the candidate's application and the integrity of the examination process. Professionals in similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing rules and regulations. When faced with ambiguity or a situation that could be interpreted in multiple ways, the professional should err on the side of caution and seek clarification from the appropriate authority. This proactive approach, prioritizing transparency and adherence to established protocols, is crucial for maintaining ethical standards and ensuring fair outcomes. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the relevant rules and guidelines. 2. Assessing the situation against these rules. 3. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from the designated authority. 4. Acting in a manner that upholds integrity and fairness.